This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. This episode, we have a very special guest. She's quite easily one of the most talented and dynamic sports media personalities on the planet. I've had the opportunity to see her speak on panels with other industry experts in 2018 at the National Fantasy Football Convention and at Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association conferences as well. And I will say no one commands the stage and the panel discussions like she does. Now, after an awesome 7-year run at Yahoo, she'll soon be entering her second year with ESPN. It's ESPN fantasy analyst Liz Loza.
Oh my goodness.
Welcome in.
Thank you for such a wildly warming introduction that you made me blush a couple of times. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and congratulations on everything you've achieved. Seriously, you deserve everything, every bit of success and more that comes your way.
I appreciate it. And you have always been lovely at all of the live events. And I really, to your credit, grounding presence that's been nothing but generous, because sometimes, as you know, those events can go a little sideways.
It can happen. Well, it's my pleasure. I love supporting people that do, all the incredible work that we consume in the fantasy industry, and so it's always a pleasure to be there and provide some positivity. So now your rise to where you are now has included a ton of hard work and dedication to your craft. Which obviously does not happen overnight. So let's discuss your journey that got you here. You possess such an amazing ability to tell a story and clearly have an undeniable passion for sports. How did your childhood, help shape your path in life and towards your career in fantasy?
Well, thank you again. And I think that when people ask me this question, I always remember a quote that Bruce Arians said, which is that sometimes the people who have the most interesting takes lived the most detoured lives. And I am not, I didn't go to Mizzou or Syracuse. Don't have a degree in broadcast journalism. Sometimes people get very frustrated by that. It was definitely a make your own way. Not a plan, just here's how the dominoes fell, and at every crossroads I made a choice. I often took, not to be too cheesy, but the road less traveled, and it's been a wild journey that keeps me guessing. As to my childhood, I will say that I was raised by a single mom. My mom became a single mom when I was 13 months old and was forced to or made the choice, I should say, to move in with my grandparents. My grandfather was a World War II vet raised in Chicago, very much emblematic of the Carl Sandburg poem, Chicago, stormy, husky, brawling. He actually worked on the railroad. And all of a sudden, he was the domestic caregiver to this little baby girl. And wow. So he kind of taught me, and he had raised 2 daughters himself who were twins. So he was, a proud girl dad, if you will, before there was a hashtag attached to that phrase. And he just I went everywhere with him. Sometimes that meant not going to preschool and instead going to the racetrack and betting on the ponies, which is a Mother's Day tradition I now do with my kids.
No, that's cool.
Or, so a little bit unconventional. Sometimes it was teaching me how to change the oil in like a Chevy Chevette, where you could actually still change the oil in cars because they weren't completely computerized. And of course, my upbringing included lots of sports, particularly Chicago-focused sports. I like to say that I like to tell this story. I think it's
ignore.
No, I mean, hey, Grandpa, what's up? Like, I
know what just happened.
My grandpa's up above, and he heard me, and he's just saying hi.
Wow.
So in 3rd grade, my mom was again working, providing, and my grandpa would be the person to shuttle me to dance class, ice skating, after school, etc. He was also in charge of costumes, and it was Halloween. And all of the other little girls wanted to be princesses, which totally makes sense. But I was Ryan Sandberg, who was the second baseman for the Chicago Cubs. And that, I think, is completely illustrative of my childhood and my experience with him. Being a girl in sports was completely normalized by the fact that this like World War II vet, this uber masculine man who worked on the locomotives, was teaching me all about it. And I will also say that my son, who is playing in his Little League championship on Saturday, also wears the number 23 as who Ryan Sandberg and my grandfather. So anyway, I think that definitely helped shape my view of sports, and also in a really weird way, and got me into fantasy. So I'll go to the next part of it, which is how I ended up in a career here.
Yeah.
It was time to go to college. I ended up going to Brown University on the East Coast, which was something that nobody from my high school had ever done before. I don't come from privilege. And so it was through other weird things that I was like, oh, I think I'll apply to this school. I didn't know that you could apply to colleges that didn't send you applications. And Brown sent me an application, and I looked it up in the 350 colleges Princeton review guide, and it sounded cool. And so I applied not knowing it was an Ivy League school, and got in. And then when I visited campus, I was like, oh my gosh, I think that I feel like this is a big deal. Like, I feel like I should do this. So I went there, and my grandfather was heartbroken because I left home. He didn't want me to leave, and he ended up, his health declined rapidly, basically the 3 days after I left for college. My mom hid it from me because she didn't want me. I was transitioning. I didn't know anybody in college. I was definitely like a fish out of water. Didn't know anybody. These kids were just, I mean, they were dealing at a different level than I had ever experienced. And around the finals of my first semester, my mom called and said, you have to come home. Your grandfather's not well. By the time I got home, he had passed, and I was gutted. Like still, like I'd still get emotional thinking about it. I miss him every single day. And as a way to grieve, this is around Christmas time. As a way to grieve, I turned on the TV, and the Bears were playing the Vikings. So I watched the Bears-Vikings game. And then I just started watching every single football game. It didn't matter if it was an NFC North matchup. I just used that as a way to be with him and grieve, because it had been part of our relationship and one of the traditions that we had between us for over a decade, nearly, I was 18 at the time. So I just did that. And then that became a habit. And the next year I watched all the football games, and I found myself not just an NFC North fan, but a fan of the league. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'm dating this boy, and it's new in our relationship, and it's a Sunday in September. And he sheepishly says, I have this thing called the Red Zone channel. And I'm in this thing called a fantasy football league. And do you mind if we watch football all day? And he was so shy to ask. And I was like, are you kidding? I thought, yes, let's do that. That's kind of what I do. I love watching football all day on Sundays. But what is this fantasy football thing you're talking about? And he opens his laptop, and he's playing on Yahoo, and he's showing me the product and how it works. And we're, and how Red Zone is like only scoring positions. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And he starts asking me questions, or noticing the players that are on his team and what they're doing in real time. And I'm just tracking it. And he starts saying, well, who do you think I should move here eventually over the course of the season? And we co-managed at that point his team to a Super Bowl victory in his fantasy league. And then, as luck would have it, one of the guys in his league dropped out, and they needed someone new. And so I said, I would like my own team now. Like, I was completely hooked, but I had no idea where to find people to play fantasy football with. And so I got this free spot. I took up this spot, and I ended up managing my own team to the Super Bowl. And of course, all the guys in the league balked and they said it was beginner's luck. And then the next year, I went to the Super Bowl and won it again. So ostensibly, I won the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. And it was at that point that I was watching Fantasy Football Live, playing on Yahoo, setting my lineup. I saw Brad Evans and Andy Behrens and Brandon Funston. And I said, I don't understand why there aren't any women or there isn't more diversity in this programming. I mean, if the NFL audience is nearly 50%, I think at the time it was 46%, why isn't that reflected in the content that's being created? This is awesome. I love it. I think people would really love to do this. And my boyfriend at the time, I mean, I remember he had like, it was either, he had food hanging out of his mouth. I don't know if it was a slice of pizza or like a wing, but I remember him like trying to swallow and said, I don't know, why don't you, just shrugged and said, why don't you start a blog? So I did. I started a blog called thefantasyfootballgirl.com, and I had been working in entertainment at the time, and I put myself on a content schedule, borrowing and learning from everything that I had experienced in entertainment, and started making vlogs and a podcast and gave myself a Twitter handle. And I was writing, doing all three things, and the fantasyfootballgirl.com was born, and that just snowballed.
What do you think, in your opinion, what stood out the most about that blog to get more eyes attracted to it?
I was doing video in a time that nobody else was doing video. I started the blog in 2009. I started the podcast in 2011, wow. But I started doing video before vlogs were a thing. I just thought that like short form snackable content was a place where people could grow. And, you know, YouTube was a thing, and it was growing though. You know, it was like newish. Yeah. I didn't know how to capitalize on YouTube. And I also was like, well, I don't want to put my content on somebody else's platform. I'll use it to host for free and link through, but I want my own branding. Yeah. And so I taught myself how to read off of a teleprompter. I didn't know, like I bought like a refurbished cheap iPad just so that I could download the teleprompter app. And then I found this guy in Texas who basically made teleprompters, which were wooden boxes that had this reflective glass on it.
Sure.
And since I had friends who worked in entertainment and I had worked in entertainment, there was a friend who was a producer at the time who was like getting rid of a bunch of her gear, like lights and tripods. And she was like, we don't need any of this stuff. It's outdated. And I was like, oh, I'll take it. Like, here's $100. I will take it all off your hands. And so I like set up in the corner of my house. Like I just set up this makeshift stand. And I remember like crouching on one knee, like holding myself up sideways so that I could like be in frame, and taught myself how to read out of off of a teleprompter. I mean, there were no iPhones, right? I was just like kind of piecing all of this together. It wasn't just like recording on your phone.
Yeah.
So I kind of pieced all that together, and then would like taught myself how to edit on my Mac and would upload those videos onto the fantasyfootballgirl.com, but they were consistently produced. And I, again, put myself on a schedule. So every Monday there was going to be a video, and every Friday there was going to be a video. And so I kind of trained my audience to know what the programming was going to look like. That differentiated me from the space in the space.
Yeah. So obviously your background with Hollywood and theater and your degree in linguistics. I mean, all that stuff kind of came together.
Oh yes, my degree in linguistics is definitely cashing in for me now. Yeah, I wrote I wrote my thesis on on truth and advertising. It was like a collaboration between the cognitive science department and the evolution of language through marketing.
It's amazing. That's cool. That's
I don't know if it helped me now, but
no, that's cool.
It was fascinating at the time. Yeah,
that's cool. So, were you embraced within the fantasy football community immediately, or was it something that took time? And and I guess how did everything kind of lead up to your position with Yahoo?
I think that it was a different time then. Twitter was not a hellscape. People were generally welcoming. I think that I was so different, partially because I came from a different background, and obviously because I was a woman. Like there was nobody else really in the space who was creating content regularly as a fantasy analyst. I also want to take the opportunity to say that I created the Fantasy Football Girl as a place to learn and engage. I didn't certainly initially call myself an expert. I wasn't creating graphs. I remember the opening intro to the first blog post on the FF Girl was, this is a place for me to learn from other people. I am new to this. I find it super fun. I'm passionate about it, but I want to engage and create a community. So I think that probably that approach helped ingratiate me to other people, because at the time everything was so new. We didn't have like egos about it yet. We were all kind of nerdy kids doing this new thing and using technology to support it in ways that had not been popularized yet. So there was the allowance. We were allowed to make mistakes because we were still in the fact-finding phase. And I think now everybody knows everything. So heaven forbid you write a typo. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, geez.
They must mean that you're an idiot. And so I just think it was a special, smaller time. And so I do think I was embraced by the other content creators and analysts at the time. And it wasn't until my audience grew and people who were, I don't want to call them enthusiasts because they're not really enthusiastic about much, but when you put yourself out there, then people, I mean, I don't know if even some of the like trolls ever played fantasy football. I think they're just like taking an opportunity to dunk on someone because they feel so small.
Yeah. So everything, all that built up, and you ended up going to Yahoo. They
how did that happen? Yes, you asked me that question. So, so I created the fantasyfootballgirl.com. I was still working as an actor and doing voiceover, and it was becoming clear that, well, I got pregnant. I'm being honest. Like, I got pregnant, and I was like, oh my God, I'm having a baby. Nobody, like the on-camera acting world, I don't care what people say, is not friendly to new moms. They don't care. They don't want you to have a baby bump. There's a lot of talk about how much better it is. Whatever. It's not. So I was working in voiceover, and I was using voiceover to supplement the fantasy stuff, like the minimal fantasy stuff. And I was doing, like, I said yes to everybody's anything. Every podcast, could you write a free something? At one point, I reached out on iTunes and searched for fantasy football podcasts, and I wrote individualized query letters. I listened to like 2 of every single podcast that came up, and wrote individual query letters asking if I could do a sleeper segment, because I was really fascinated by these under the radar players and underdogs always. Sure. I mean, of course, probably that's because I identify as one, but yeah. And there was 2 podcasts got back to me. One guy said, we're never going to have a woman on this show. Wow. The other guys said, yeah, sure. Let's try it. They were the fantasy football guys. At the time, they were the largest, the most downloaded independent podcast in the space, and number 2 behind CBS. Wow. And they said, sure, it was Kevin Moore and Lyle Conkeal, and I would do a sleeper segment on their regular show. And that really like grew my I don't know what it's called, like audience, I guess. Yeah. And so I was getting practice being on, I remember so nervous for my first one. I was getting practice on being on podcasts, and then that like grew, and I started engaging with people on Twitter, engaging with Brad Evans, and engaging with Andy Behrens. Andy asked me to be in a Pro-Am league and write something for Yahoo. All this stuff was free, right? Like just doing all the free stuff. One day I was on Nando DeFino's Sirius XM show and had a pretty good time slot. We finished, and I got a DM from Mark Bloom, who goes by Dr. Roto. Mm-hmm. And he said, can I call you and talk to you? And I said, sure. So we talked and he was like, how do I not know who you are? And I'm like, I don't know how you don't know I am. It's your problem. And he said, I'm working for a company called Scout. At the time it was under the Fox umbrella, I believe. And we're looking to grow. Can I forward your name to my boss and have him interview you to see if it's a fit? So I said, yes. And at this time I had like a 13-month-old baby. My son was 13 months. So everything was chaotic and in flux and in transition. And I could have looked at it and said, there's too much going on. But instead I looked at it and said, well, everything's chaotic anyway. So let's just add to the crazy. Not sleeping anyway. What's one more hour lost, you know? And so I interviewed and they hired me, and to write, like, oh my God, I was writing so much. They hired me. Honestly, if I look back, the churn, I think I was required every week of the season to deliver 6 articles, 2 videos, and I had to appear on their pod, which was a lot when you have a 13-month-old baby and you are making not a lot of money. But I did it because I understood that I did it mostly in the middle of the night when at weird hours when my son would finally sleep. And I thought I'd lean in, and I needed that I wasn't going out for auditions and I was doing minimal voiceover. And so I leaned in and was like, I think I got to take this shot. Like, I don't love how I don't think it's great, the terms of this contract, but I am betting on myself that I don't have to be here for more than a season. Yeah. Out of that season, I went to the FSTA at the time in Vegas. And actually it was Brad Evans who was like, you have to get to Vegas. You have to meet these people in person. Networking is part of this. You have to. So I did. And I met finally in person Andy and Brad after years of communicating on Twitter and online, and met a bunch of people in person and took a bunch of cell phone numbers, and everyone had been impressed with my work at Scout, and it had really made me credible, in the space. And then that spring, I tested at the NFL Network, and I called Yahoo and said, because I didn't think I was going to get that NFL Network job. Yeah. But I knew that there was something happening. Like, I knew it was my name. Like, you don't just go from working at this small place to like testing at the NFL Network if there is an upward movement, right? Sure. And I called Yahoo and I was like, I'm testing here. And they were like, don't sign anything. Like, you won't even have to audition for us. Don't sign. Like, we want you. We're just waiting on corporate headcount numbers stuff. And I received a formal offer from Yahoo Fantasy the week of my son's 2nd birthday, and was thrilled to take it. I mean, I remember almost falling out of my chair because I was fist bumping the air so hard.
Oh, it's awesome.
It was amazing to me that I could have an opportunity to work with the people and get paid to, like, real money. Get paid to work with the people that I had spent all of this time looking up to and engaging with, and that they believed in me meant so much, and that I could be a cast member on the show that in many ways started and inspired the blog and the journey was one of the most incredible full circle moments of my career.
That's so cool. I mean, when I started playing online, it was with Yahoo. And so those 3 guys, Brandon and Andy and Brad, meant so much to everybody who played fantasy in the early 2000s, because those are the faces that were providing analysis, on online. It was so it must have been really cool to go full circle like that. They're wonderful
humans.
Amazing
also,
people.
Nice that they're not jerks. They're fantastic. Fantastic people. I mean, I see Andy lives in Chicago, not too far from my mom. And Brad and I were texting like 3 weeks ago. So we're all still in touch, and they are incredibly sweet, wonderful. Like, just a quick story about Brad. I remember I had to fly to Sunnyvale to San Jose for some work thing. And I was very pregnant at the time with my 2nd child. And there was a huge TSA line, security line to get at the airport to get on. And like Brad could tell that I like wasn't feeling well because I was super pregnant, but I was complaining. I was just like doing my thing. And he had fast pass or not fast pass, whatever it's called, like super access. And he just like looked back. He was going to a different destination, but he like looked back, grabbed me, and he's like, I'm sorry, my pregnant wife, hold on. Like, and like ushered me through. I mean, probably it wasn't like okay to do when we cut the line, but like that is just that is pure Brad Evans. Like I didn't ask. I was definitely like not feeling well. It was a lot. And I'd been traveling too much probably at that point in my pregnancy, but like he just like scooped me up, my pregnant wife. And also everybody was cool because they saw that I was like super pregnant trying to get on. So, I mean, but that's Brad. He's incredible.
Yeah, best of the best for sure. So obviously your run at Yahoo was amazing. So much great content produced there. Eckler's Edge was fantastic. What was it like working on that project?
Oh, that was like one of the highlights of my career for many reasons, not just because I got to work with Austin, who is an incredible human being, just celebrated a birthday on May 17th. But because the way it was gifted to me exemplified the trust that the company had in me. Ryan Dornbush called me, I don't know, I think it was in like July of that year, maybe end of June of 2021. And he said, all right, we're going to do something different. Because we had been talking about like, why can't we get an active player? You know, it's always retired players. Like there's got to be a way to break through. There's got to be a player who gets this and have them do regular fantasy content. And Ryan and I always kind of like ideated and wishcast about it. And so he was like, all right, I got 3 things for you. I got Austin Eckler, I got a producer, and I got an editor. You got to go make a show. Oh, cool. And that was it. Like we didn't have a blueprint. We didn't have anything that existed before this. It had never been done in the sports media landscape. And he was like, so you got to drive it and put your heads together. Like Ryan Dornbush ran video at the time for Yahoo. He's since moved on to a different company. But he was like, it's you got to figure it out. And so that to me was so cool because it was getting to do something, not just like, oh, I got picked to do this cool thing, but it was like, you got picked to do it and you have a responsibility now because it's never been done before and you better make sure it doesn't fail. Austin trusted me. Our chemistry was immediate. We got along really well. Like the fact that he trusted me and I trusted him and we respected each other's boundaries. And if there were things we would check in about, like, is this a comfortable thing to talk about? Is it not a comfortable thing? That was a COVID year. So there were a lot of question marks across the entire league. Right. So, you know, what do you feel comfortable discussing? And it happened. The planets aligned in a really special way.
Yeah, it was incredible content for sure. Now, obviously that led your 7-year run at Yahoo ended and you've been with ESPN now over the last year. What has that experience been like for you thus far?
It's so, I can't like believe it still. If that makes sense. It's just been a wild ride. Like I loved being at Yahoo. And when the ESPN opportunity came up, I thought this is the time. You know, they say that life unfolds in 7-year patterns. I don't know how true that is, but that's something that is often said. And I was like, I think this is time, like for me to grow and make this move. But I signed a contract on like August 9th and I was on a plane to do the marathon on August 13th. Like there was no, like the summer after the 4th of July, the content starts a churning and August is the most unpredictable, chaotic month practically of the whole year because you're not in a cadence yet. The rhythm has yet to be established. And so it was like working with these people that I hadn't even met in person yet. And then all of a sudden, hearing content, like we're going to have you write this and you're going to be on this pod and my reveal pod. Adam Schefter was like calling me and saying he wants me on his pod. I'm going on Adam Schefter's podcast. And I cried on it like a real, like I got super emotional on his podcast. But awesome. I also think that's kind of like what has helped me engage with audiences that I'm pretty real and authentic. And I was like, I'm crying on Adam Schefter's podcast. Like, this is what's happening for real. So when I make a pick in fantasy, at least, I really believe it, because I clearly can't hide what I'm feeling. So it's been surreal. I mean, and it's offered me another opportunity to do new things. I got to be on Sports Center here in LA. Every week, Sports Center invited me on to do a fantasy football segment. It was the first time in Sports Center history that the fantasy group got to come on and talk fantasy on a flagship show like that. And that was, and that again was a similar thing. One of the producers from Sports Center was basically like, well, we've never done this before. So what do you think? Let's build it. Let's create something. This is an opportunity to do something new. So having opportunities like that after doing it with Eckler's Edge to a different degree and in a different way, obviously, was so invigorating. And it just felt like I'm really proud of the fact that I get to be one of the many people who are bringing fantasy into the mainstream. And, we're here too.
Yeah, no, and I'm so excited for you to be there, and it's amazing because I had that opportunity to go out to Bristol when I won the Commissioner of the Year contest and meet all the people behind the scenes at ESPN Fantasy, and it's so weird to growing up just obsessed with Sports Center, obviously massive ESPN company, to go there and see just how of a small world it is, and it's like a small campus, and people are so incredible there, and
they're so
obviously
nice.
So amazing. I mean, Field Yates is just incredible, and Daniel Dopp has just got the heart of he's and Stephania Bell is wonderful, but then even just the people behind the scenes, everybody that took care of us, amazing people. When it comes to the ESPN platform, are there certain things that you like about it more than you maybe knew about in the past, since you've obviously got the behind the scenes tour?
The fantasy product, or
exactly. Yeah. What do you like about the ESPN fantasy product?
I actually think it's a really intuitive product. I mean, again, everyone knows that I started my career on Yahoo and with Yahoo, but that was the platform I played on. And I definitely didn't play on ESPN as much because I had loyalty to the company that I was with. But I think, to me, the thing that ESPN's platform does really well is it's much more intuitive than people believe it to be at times. I mean, the sorting tools are really great. I kind of dig that it's 1 point PPR as their standard scoring system, because at Yahoo it's half point. And I understand, I'm not trying to start the standard versus 1 point PPR debate, but mathematically it's a little easier to not have to worry about a fraction. And I also like the player cards. Like, I think the player cards are really easy to use, and it's a seamless product. And the league manager tool allows for a lot of flexibility, which also helps you kind of make tweaks in your league that doesn't throw people, but keeps things fresh as well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I have a funny side story. My daughter, she's 10 now. And last year, first time, she's like, "Okay, I want to play fantasy," right? So we went to ESPN. I said, "Let's go on like some public leagues together. We'll sign up at the same time, and hopefully we'll get into a league." Oh. Well, we tried it 5 times, and we finally got into a league together. So, but every time I didn't get into a league with her, I canceled out. But she kept accepting it, apparently. So by the end of it, she was in 5 leagues.
Oh my goodness.
So ESPN was great last year in for a 10-year-old. I mean, it worked amazing because she actually managed 5 teams. I helped on most of them except for the one that we faced each other. And we ended up, having a final week of the season. Winner gets into the playoffs battle, which was a ton of fun. But she had just an amazing time, and she loved being on the ESPN app, and she loved seeing Liz Loza on there, and because she, obviously have heard the name a ton. So that was a fun experience. So
the app's pretty cool, right? Like, I feel like the app is really easy to use.
Yeah, for sure. To me, the league experience is the foundation of the game. What do you love most about playing in a home fantasy football league? And what are some of your best memories and fondest memories of the league experience for you?
I mean, I like talking crap every week. I think that that's kind of fun, like taking the piss out of each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the social aspect, right? Like, it's fun to win, but if people only played fantasy football to win, we wouldn't be decades into this as a hobby, because there's only going to be one winner, right? I think so much of it is the opportunity to engage with your friends that may live in the same geographic area or be spread out throughout the country. My husband plays in a league with his college buddies. They're all over the country. And every week, though, he knows he's going to talk to at least one of them, you know?
Yeah.
I also think football's pretty great because the majority of the games are on Sundays, and most people, maybe not me or you, have the day off on Sunday, you know? And I think that that's just the camaraderie of the league, and every single league is different because it's comprised of different people from different places in your life. One of my favorite stories, when I was running the fantasyfootballgirl.com, so this was years ago, I got this email from a grandmother in Florida. And she said she found my site because she was trying to understand fantasy football because her grandson had just left for college, and they had put together a family league so that they could all stay in touch. And she missed him terribly since he was out of state at university. And so she found my site so that she could learn how to play, and also not just like, oh, I'm playing Granny this week, she's going to like start 3 kickers, she doesn't know what she's talking about, but actually impress her grandson enough so that he'd want to engage with her. She didn't win. She came in 3rd, still made the playoffs. And she just sent me this. I mean, I was like, there's a grandma who wants, like, that to me is fantasy football. People are playing this thing as a way to keep in touch with their children, with a way to relate to different coworkers, maybe. Like, that to me is the part of it that makes it so successful.
Yeah, no, that's obviously the things that I love most about the fantasy experience. And there's so many different ways you can just provoke more engagement. Are there certain recommendations that you have for maximizing engagement in fantasy leagues?
Oh yeah, I actually wrote an article about this for ESPN called like ways to spruce up your fantasy league. There's a ton. I mean, I think first of all, different formats for people who, you know, don't necessarily want your standard 12-team redraft, beyond Superflex, beyond Scott Fish's wild imaginations, you know.
Yeah.
I got into guillotine last year. My friend James Roday and Garrett Lerner both put me in a guillotine league, and I loved it. Vampire is a new format. So I think if you're looking, you know, always keep your home league. That's fine. But if you're looking to branch out, different formats are really fun, different scoring tweaks. Beyond, you know, there's obviously tight end premium and, you know, 1 point PPR, half point PPR. But I also think that like bonuses, like we just came off of a Super Bowl that crushed by over 20 points, right? So like high scoring, I think we can all agree is fun. Like that's the way things are going. So doing bonuses, like if a running back goes over a set milestone or quarterback passes for a set number of yards, getting a bonus for every player who goes over those, adding penalties are like interesting scoring tweaks that I think kind of keep you sharp on your and on like strategizing. Yeah. I also like weekly bonuses because sometimes, like, let's be honest, like if you know you're out of the playoffs, it can be tough to keep those bottom half teams engaged throughout the season, right? If they're just not a naturally competitive person, especially if you think about the timing, like the holidays start coming and those times of year are busy, like, I'm just not as excited. There's nothing left on the waiver wire. But if you do like weekly bonuses or weekly like giveaways, right? For anything, like there was, you can do them for anything set, right? Like again, like a running back or something like that. But there was one Twitter follower shared that their league, the team with the highest score for the week got to rename and reselect the logo of the team with the fewest points for that week.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
So I thought that was a really creative way. And, you know, so obviously the different random achievements each week for the highest scoring running back or most receiving yards by a player, most team touchdowns, whatever, those are ways. But getting creative with those weekly bonuses is definitely a fun thing. I like that. How about last place punishments? Are there certain things that you've seen that just make you cringe or things that you think are just outrageous and fun? Cringe, oh, for sure. I think my favorite one is, and this was all like vetted, so I just, you know, people don't come after me, but the like guy, there was someone who had to rescue a cat. Like the last place team had to rescue a cat. Now, this person was looking for a pet. They were not alert. Everybody was in agreement. Like they weren't allergic to a cat. This wasn't like getting an animal that you're not going to be responsible for. But I think that to me was kind of awesome. Like that.
That's
and then
good.
I believe he named the cat after the league.
Oh,
and now he has
fun.
like a cat that he like cares about and is a companion. So
that's good.
Yeah, that to me has been my favorite because it's hilarious and also feel good.
Yeah.
There's, taking out a billboard that says, Joe Schmo's fantasy team stinks. Having to do that is, I think, pretty funny. And I also like what Michael Gelkin says, like if you come in last, this is based on his donating to various player charities, right? Like if Travis Kelce got you to the Super Bowl, then maybe take a portion of your winnings and donate them to Travis Kelce's charity. But the reverse of that in form of a punishment is needing to pay if you are punished, but the payment doesn't go to the league. It goes to the charity of the player who stunk the hardest for you, or was like the biggest for you.
Yeah, the team that cost you. Yeah.
Yeah, like who is the player that you think cost you? Although none of that is true, and you should never tweet those people. But
do not.
Who were you most frustrated by? Probably that player has a charity, so then you donate X amount to that player's charity as your quote punishment.
That's good. That's good. So, in your opinion, what makes a fun live draft?
Booze and wings.
That's good. That's good.
I mean, engagement. I do like to drink and draft. I know some people are like, "Oh, you might not make a good pick," but I don't know. I'm pretty confident. I've had enough, my tolerance is high enough after the pandemic that I can handle myself, and just good food. You know what? Field games are fun. We've done that one year where we've like to determine draft order.
There you go.
Have gone and done a day of field games. Trophy Smack kind of did it for the Scott Fish Bowl for the SFB at the Trophy Smack headquarters. We did that, and they did like indoor bowling and pinball and pool, and then you tabulated your scores from those various table games, and then that determined your draft order. You could pick based on. So we've done field games in our home league with a couple of people here, and they were fun, like 3-legged races and stuff like that. That's always a good time, and it involves the whole family. That's like for people who have kids and you need to eat the units on a week, on like a weekday. Yeah,
no, that's good. I was going to bring up the SFB 12 live draft, right? So the first time they ever did live drafts, right? So I hosted the Seattle live draft. It was so much fun. Brandon Funston came because he's not too far from me. So it was so great to spend time with him there. But that was so much fun. But it was hard not to be paying attention to what was going on with Trophy Smack. And what was that experience like for you?
Those guys are awesome. They're hilarious. I love everyone who works on that team. It was great. Like, it was a great time. My friend Garrett Lerner, so Tom Everett Scott, who I'm friends with, and Garrett Lerner and I all live relatively close to one another. So we all carpooled down together. We ate outside. We had lunch outside of the place where that thing you do is shot, and people kept coming asking poor Tom for selfies, and he was very sweet.
Oh, funny.
And then we went to the draft party, whatever it was. I don't know, because there was like a little party before we started drafting, and Scott was there. Scott Fish was there. And some gentleman brought me a magnum of rosé out of the kindness of his heart, which was very lovely. And we were just like playing the games. I also think the timing of it, because COVID was like over and we were finally opened up and everyone could gather for the first time in so long. Yeah. It was like, I don't know, it was like going to a boardwalk and playing these carnival games, and then with your friends that you haven't seen in person in forever or ever, and then like drafting, having a fantasy football draft. Like, it was awesome. Yeah, it was so appealing to me. I'm actually going to head down there this year. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to LA. Yep. So who's hosting Seattle? Yep. Yeah, I hosted Seattle. Well, no one.
So
no, and so there's no Seattle draft this year.
So no Seattle draft this year. That's the bad news, but I can't wait to get down there because it looked like so much fun. I mean, so many great people, but it's such a great atmosphere. And you're right, Trophy Smack, they definitely know how to put things together. Well. Yeah.
What league are you in, or what division?
I am in the Pink's hot dog division, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I've stood in line for a Pink's hot dog at like 1 o'clock in the morning back in the day. It's like a napalm bomb to the gut, but it is so refreshing.
Is it good? I don't know anything about it. It was just a fun group that it looked like I just jumped in on that one. So I'm excited.
So we won't be in the same division, but definitely have to hang out while you're there.
Sounds good. So then when it comes to the actual game of fantasy, are there certain core principles that you enter into your draft or basically construct your roster with?
I mean, there's the standard balance, right? Like if I don't want an all upside team, I don't want an all floor team. I think for me, I like to get my guys. Like I'm not someone, whether this is good or bad. If there's a player I want on my team, I am going to get that player. If it means reaching, I'm going to reach for that player. There's not going to be a situation where I'm like, no, I'm going to see if, they're still available. Like if I want Lamar Jackson this year, I'm going to take Lamar Jackson. I also feel like last year, the league that I did, the competitive league that I did the best in was the one in which I took Justin Jefferson #2 overall. I did not I had the second overall pick. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor went #1. I was not going to make the Austin Eckler CMC choice. I wanted a receiver, and that worked out really, really well. I went to the Super Bowl. I ended up losing, but I went to the Super Bowl in that league, and Justin Jefferson carried me. And the running back depth that I found later, like Josh Jacobs, who I had on my team, like all of those dead zone picks started to really ROI. And I feel like there is this absolutism in fantasy drafting that needs to be abolished. Like there is no rule. And this year, by the way, I think Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp are like 3 of the first 4 picks, which is just recency bias. Like it's just like it could be possible this year that Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, and CMC are the true first 3 picks. I just think you can't put so much on last year's results. Like every year in redraft is a new thing. And the chips are going to fall. So don't be so absolutist and you're like, I only do this. The only exception to that is that I will probably only draft anchor RB in terms of running back strategy. That is the only place where I'm like, well, I don't imagine I will go RB ever again, maybe. I should never say that, though. I probably won't go like 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. And when I say anchor RB, I mean a running back in rounds 1 through 3, and then not again until the dead zone, probably round 5 or 6, maybe as early as 4 if I drafted a running back in like the first 2 rounds, right? So anchor RB is just take 1 running back over the first 3 rounds, and then another one, your RB2, rounds 4 through 6, and then a 3rd running back and just 3. Rounds like 8 through 11.
Yeah, it's hard to pass up on those big wide receivers these days, for sure.
Yeah, and I also think that after last year's production at quarterback, right? Like that has been this is what I mean. Like the long-standing belief was that you wait on quarterback. I preached it myself, and it tanked me last year. Yeah. My Russell Wilson, Trey Lance teams were caca. So like everybody with Josh Allen, at least for the first 3 quarters of the season, was crushing. So I think, what the anchor RB strategy allows is for you to prioritize other positions, elite players at other positions, without relying on a position that holds so much volatility in the first half of your draft.
Yeah. Obviously got to stay fluid. Things change.
Sure.
Got to stay fluid. All right. How about some rapid fire questions? So just first things that come to mind. I'll throw out some thoughts. So what do you love most about fantasy football?
The adventure of it.
I love it. What sports did you play growing up?
I was a competitive figure skater and I played volleyball.
Oh, that's cool. Our daughter just started figure skating last year, so she loves it.
Yeah, it
So
was super fun. Did it all the way until I blew out my ankle, but was landing axles and double sow cows and the whole thing.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, involvement on Super Bowl Radio Row and media events like that.
A+, awesome. Robert Woods is one of the most incredible human beings. He told me about the loss of his father and started tearing up. I started tearing up. We hugged. It was one of the most like real, authentic, transformative interviews I've ever done. And I've interviewed a ton of people on Radio Row. And I just am a giant Robert Woods fan as a result of that interaction.
That's cool.
Also,
Yeah,
Mac Jones is like peak Gen Z QB. That dude is interesting.
Yeah, I love your content on that platform. Scott Fish, the actual real life person.
One of my closest friends, an absolute gem, have been in the Scott Fish Bowl since its inaugural year. And so kind. Can't wait to see him in July. And fingers crossed, he's going to start a kids fish bowl, which my son, who's 9, is thrilled to be a part of.
Most difficult challenge you faced in your career thus far?
Holding a firm boundary with holding a firm boundary with people I want to impress, but knowing that if I set a precedent about how much content I can give over how much time, then that might be taken advantage of.
Okay. What's your proudest career accomplishment?
First of all, thank you, because there are a couple. And so you're making me feel very grateful for this journey that I've had. Doing mostly football with Martellus Bennett in 2018 was one of my most favorite years, and it set me up for so many other opportunities. That's like the thing, is that when you have an opportunity that's new and you absolutely crush it, then all of these other doors fly wide open. And but that experience allowed me to be seen as someone who could talk fantasy, but also hang with professional athletes, and led to the Austin Eckler opportunity, which, of course, winning an FSWA award with Austin in our first year of this show that had never existed in the landscape is massive. And going to ESPN, the worldwide sports leader, is obviously incredible. And getting to do other sports like Fantasy WNBA and covering Formula One racing, not from a fantasy angle, but just from a mainstream angle, have been two of the new opportunities. Like, wow, I'm doing new stuff still at this point in my career. And that ever expanding growth is what I guess I'm most grateful for every single day.
Makes sense. That's wonderful. So comfort zones kind of ties in with that. You burst through a lot of comfort zones in your career.
I think the dirty little secret of me is that I've always been an outlier and kind of a weirdo. And so I've never felt comfortable anywhere, which has made me incredibly comfortable with discomfort. And that has been a boon to me in my personal and professional life.
What have you learned the most about yourself in the last 5 years?
I am resilient AF.
I love it.
I also have an engine. I have an engine that never stops, which can be a detriment, which is why I have to be more mindful about setting firm boundaries.
It makes sense. Storytelling in fantasy content.
That's the name of the game. Sometimes your job is not just to give good advice, but it's to give advice that people want to engage with and create a narrative that people can understand, so that they are taking part in more than just who to start this week, but why and how.
That is good. That is good. Name 3 people that come to mind that you just truly admire in the fantasy industry.
Just 3. Matthew Berry has always been wonderful to me long before I got to ESPN. This was a man who championed me, who pulled me aside and gave me tips, who was kind to me when I met him in person. I have nothing but amazing things to say about TMR. And also because he is such a gracious human who I am so happy is leading the charge and pushing fantasy into yet to be, or had yet to have been, arenas, was so gracious after the ESPN announcement was made, and we texted about it and we spoke about it in Vegas at the FSGA. And I'm so grateful for him for the way he is pioneering for the industry as a whole and the way he has championed me as an individual. Andy Behrens is one of the kindest humans I've ever met. He drives a Jeep and drinks IPA. I don't know why that's coming into my brain, but he's always been incredibly kind to me. And I trust as a friend. He's been in my home. Like there's a real friendship there. And I don't think anyone is as a better human than Andy Behrens. Amy Trask, who I just had dinner with a couple of 2 weekends ago, has been a wonderful sounding board as another woman in this space. And she is so stinking smart and so generous, and her capacity to listen and her capacity for compassion are unrivaled. And I'm incredibly grateful to her as well. And then I just also have to say my boss, Megan Burgoon, who I met at Yahoo and is now the person I report to at ESPN. Like, she's a total badass. And I'm so grateful that I get to work with her.
That's awesome. How much has the support of your family meant to you during this journey in the fantasy industry?
Oh, Kevin, there were some years though when the kids were little and my husband and I were both working. I didn't know if we were going to get through it together. I am lucky to have a husband that really supports me. Like, he doesn't love that I work on Sundays because he's got a Mr. Mom it a little bit. But I would say that if it weren't for him and his support, at no point was he like, nope, you can't do this, or nope, you're not making enough money, or nope, you got to stay home with the kids. Like, it has been a true partnership. He also works. He also has a demanding job, and his career is ascending, and I'm so proud of him. And it's really, as wild as our schedules are, sometimes it feels like being in Grand Central Station with the here and the there and the kids, but we made a pact that we will keep each other on track. We will prioritize our children. And sometimes that means one of us misses out on a work opportunity or the other one does. But like today, right, we had to push because I wanted to go to see my kids sing in their elementary school, and he was there too. And so I think I'm so grateful to him, and it is so key to having a mutual agreement about those things in order for both parties to feel pride in the other one and also really win as a collective.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have any advice or recommendations for people that are aspiring to get more involved in the fantasy industry?
Just do it. Stop second guessing it. Stop trying to make it perfect. I promise you that the vlogs I made in 2009 and 2010 were far from perfect. Technology is going to move. Technology is going to change. Just go out there and do your thing and be it. And don't try to emulate somebody else. Don't try to be the next Dr. Kevin Murray. Go be whatever it is. It's you. And if you're not, and if it's not working, if it's not fulfilling, if you're not liking it, don't stick to it because you made a promise to yourself. Doesn't mean you're failing. I didn't fail as an actor. I just pivoted into something else. And now my dreams I didn't even know I had get to come true.
That's outstanding. I love it. I love it. So what can we expect from Liz Loza in 2023?
More? I don't know, more. I'm just so excited because this is my first full off season and regular season with ESPN. So all of those plans are percolating. I will implore people to please check out the WNBA fantasy game. I'm new to covering that because Yahoo didn't have a WNBA game, a fantasy game. So that's been exciting, but obviously women's basketball, especially on the heels of the women's tournament, is exploding, and it's such a fascinating league, and it's the technique and precision with which these women play is absolutely breathtaking. I'm continuing to cover Formula One racing, which has been super fun. So any of you who got into it during watching Drive to Survive during COVID, I know that the Red Bull team is hard to beat, but there is a chance that with the upgrades, Mercedes can do something. And who doesn't love Fernando Alonso's rise with Aston Martin? It's a great story. So check that out. And then, of course, fantasy football. We've got podcasts. We've got Fantasy Football Now every Sunday morning. There's lots of content. I know Daniel Dopp and I are going to be collaborating a little bit, and That's always a fun tandem, the two of us. And there's probably going to be a marathon again. So check that out in August.
Exciting. So where can people find you on social media and on ESPN?
Just follow me on social media at LizLoza_FF. Be sure you've downloaded the ESPN Fantasy app, the ESPN app, obviously, as well. And, just start playing your games, start mock drafting, start having a great time. It's coming. It's coming. It's June.
It's coming
June
fast.
2nd. It's coming fast.
So is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to say before we close out?
You're wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Just I love that you continue to be such a positive presence. And I love that you're playing with your daughter. I love that she's in 5 leagues. And I just hope that people are as inspired and touched by your clear passion for other people as well as fantasy sports, because it is a wonderful, much needed thing, not just in the fantasy community, but in the world.
Thank you so much, Liz. Now, obviously, it was a pleasure to have you. You were the absolute best, and I cannot wait to see where you continue to trailblaze your path in this world. It's always fun to see what you're doing and witness this journey. So, again, absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.